Craig here for another edition of Now Age Conversations with my friend Margaret Kimberley. Hey, Margaret.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Margaret, if you don't know, and you should know by now, is the senior editor at Black Agenda Report. And I always say you don't have to be black to read it. And if you're not black, you should read it because, it's good to get perspective of people other than yourself. And I just find that I get so, it just really opens my eyes up in ways that are necessary when I read the great writers over at Black Agenda Report.
Thank you.
We are going to be talking today about how binary conditioning corrupts our culture. And it's funny, I mentioned that there's some people you could do binary conditioning to, and they know exactly what you mean. And then you can say it to some people, and they just give you the sort of deer in the headlights kind of thing. And something happened today that is just so illustrative. Hillary Clinton was given a platform on, I don't know if you saw any of it, but I mean, on CNN,
Yes.
And all I caught was the phrase Russian WikiLeaks. And so maybe you could start with that and talk about, just from that framing, what binary conditioning is.
I mean, it's this crazy either or. And I think it happens in our country as a way, I think it's deliberately encouraged as a way to cut off our options, to make us think that there's only one or two ways we can see things politically. It's Democrats or Republicans, that's it. You can't step away from those. It's like stepping off the earth, like the earth is flat. And you can't step away from that. And so for Hillary Clinton, I mean, this is a great example. We had these two horrible candidates, horrible for different reasons. We have this man who, Trump, now that he's been president, they keep talking about 100 days, and he's proven himself to be as ill-prepared, as much of a buffoon, as incurious as he showed himself to be during the campaign. Hillary Clinton had very serious flaws. It was assumed she'd be the candidate. She raised $1 billion. She raised more money than he did. She had the buy-in from the corporate media, the endorsements, the whole party behind her, everything going for her. In fact, she wanted Trump because he was supposed to be so easy to beat, because he was so horrible, and of course she would beat him. So this binary thinking that it had to be, first of all, for the Democrats, which I was for most of my life, now I'm agreeing, it was you have to go with the person who can win. Now, who determines who can win? Yes, she had more name recognition. People had heard of her longer. She could raise more money. The system was rigged on her behalf. So yes, she could beat Bernie Sanders in the primaries. But that did not make her the best person in November. So the binary thinking got us Donald Trump. And I think Bernie Sanders at least had a better chance than she did. A chance to really inspire people to bring in new voters like Trump did. Trump brought in new voters. He got 2 million more votes than Mitt Romney. Now, the reasons people voted for him were probably, for the most part, not anything noble. A lot of racism, a lot of white nationalism, but I don't think that tells the whole story. So, but I do think that the binary trap got us into this situation with this president who is despised by half of the country and this woman who won't go away. I mean, that was my first thought. Even when I saw your post about Russian WikiLeaks, I was like, can't she go away? She can't accept that she didn't win. And she said in this statement, she said, I take full responsibility for my campaign. However, I'm blaming WikiLeaks and Putin and the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and by using the phrase, just Russia, I mean, the whole binary, and when I say conditioning, it's because it's, when you say it's intentional, the media and the languaging is really intentional about, so, when they keep drilling down with Russia, Rachel Maddow, Russia, the Washington Post, the New York Times, it's what people do when they sort of acculturate a society to war. So, you have to create a binary thinking for, you have to make we're good and they're the enemy. Good, otherwise, how can you justify killing people, a whole society? I mean, in the end, you want to kill them all. That's the idea, And you can only kill them all if you create this crazy binary pattern. But now, so they've been using this thing now. There's been a lot now. Hillary talks about evidence about how it's unquestionable, of course, that they've done this, but that the Clinton campaign, as soon like the very night that they lost, were already calculating blaming Russia,
Yes,
and creating this whole straw man about Russia. So what happens here now? Now you have a binary of Trump versus Russia versus the sitting president, like him or not. Okay, now we've got a binary going. If you don't like Trump, if you don't like Russia, and it's bouncing off one side or another of these absolute conditions, and it's dangerous. But people can't seem to think in a nuanced way anymore. They're just so conditioned into this binary trap, as you call it.
Yeah, well, we have this situation where it would seem impossible for him to win. So then he wins. So rather than think about how did he win, rather than, especially Democrats, rather than ask themselves in their leadership, how did this happen? What did you do? They have to say that there was something out of the ordinary. So in this case, it's Russia hacking the DNC. It's Trump's Russian connections. All of these things are blamed, and because it's easier. I mean, let's not skip over the obvious. It's easier than for people to have some introspection and to have to really be to think politically, which Democrats don't do. They sort of treat their party more like a religion or something, rather than being truly ideological. So rather than say, what the hell happened? How did you let this happen? It was Russia. And I must watch Rachel Maddow. I'm not going to confront my congressman. I'm not going to write a letter to the DNC. No, I'll just watch Rachel Maddow, and that will solve everything in my little binary brain. So Russia is convenient as a scapegoat because Putin had been demonized for years now. I was just thinking, it's almost impossible to say anything about him that is, if not positive, not negative, just to refute the things that are said. Once someone is called a Hitler over and over and over again, and you hear about Russian aggression over and over and over again, and you hear about oligarchs, and you hear about, I could go, and he killed Litvinenko, and anybody who died in Russia, he killed them. So all of this made him convenient and Russia convenient to be blamed for this thing that seemed so impossible. And now it's just feeding on itself. So the Democrats, rather than face up to their responsibility, they hang on to this Russia thing. It deflects criticism. It weakens Trump without them really doing the hard political work of making sure they can win elections again. So it all works together, unfortunately, in this vicious cycle of just confusion and people not thinking they know what happened, being convinced, absolutely convinced that this is about Russia. And this helps the neoliberal regime that wants to take Russia's stuff. It helps the neocons who want to, if they can, go to war against Russia. So people are buying into things ordinarily that they would not, or they claim they would not. Democrats are supposed to be the peace lovers, and they're more ready to go to war than Republicans are. Yeah. So that's where this gets us. This binary thinking has gotten us to a place of, could get us to World War III with another nuclear power. It's gotten us to a political party that refuses to save itself, and it's gotten us Donald Trump.
Yeah. I wrote my column today, about this, and I wrote it before Hillary showed up and made her comments. Otherwise, I would have used that as some evidence. But the binary topic of the moment was Barack Obama's accepting $400,000 from a Wall Street firm and the binary of one side saying that, oh no, you can't criticize him. I mean, even more so than the sort of circling the wagons around the Clintons, the circling the wagons around Barack Obama has been really intense. So, so on the one side, you had Trevor Noah, I guess, on the Daily Show, who made this ridiculous sort of a justification that, yeah, we should stop doing it, but it can't be the black guy that stops doing it, and then refuted by Tim Black, who I thought made, he just kind of laid it out there. It was a bribe for services rendered. Let's just call it what it was. Black, white, doesn't matter. Bribe's a bribe. And clearly laid out the case. And also talked about, getting out of the sort of binary box as well. So, again, in this case with Obama, can you talk a little bit about, sort of what, we've talked about this before with Obama. But, now in his post-presidency, when, I kind of thought about, he's going to pick up the Jimmy Carter social justice model or the Clinton pigs at the trough model. And now, we see where he's going now. And they try to kind of stage these little things. But it's just like the same stage managed stuff,
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to write about this in Black Agenda Report tomorrow. The thing I found, I was not shocked at all. That's what they do when they get out of office. They make money. And it tells you how corrupt our system is, that we lived in this kleptocracy. We talk about, oligarchs in Russia. Well, what do we have? We have these very wealthy people who pick the president for us, and they are chosen so that they will defend their interests and not ours. Now, in the case of Obama, he was marketed as this new candidate who was going to speak for the people, hope and change, and audacity of hope, and, so on and so on. He was going to be for us, although he raised more money from Wall Street than any candidate had up until that point. So that told you where he really was going to stand. And then he gets into office. Did he bail out Wall Street? Yes. He bailed out the banks? Yes. Did he prosecute any of the crooked banksters? No, he did not, because that's not what he was hired to do. So I was not shocked by this news that he took this $400,000. It shocked me that people were... I don't want to criticize people because they want to be hopeful, because they want to be positive. But there's nothing positive about the presidency and how people become president and what they do afterwards and whose interests they serve. So, of course, he took money, and it's not the last time he'll do it either. So we have this binary thinking of either, well, I thought he was a good guy, so I'm surprised, I'm shocked that he took this money, or, well, the white people did it, so you can't criticize him for doing what they've done. I read something interesting today that his goal in doing this was not just to take the money, but to put Wall Street on notice that the Democratic Party is going to remain the corporate party. And you can ignore Bernie Sanders, and look at what he's done. Keith Ellison, who is not really that progressive, was all set to become the DNC chair, and Obama recruits Tom Perez to run against him to make sure that even a little bit of reform is not going to happen. So yes, he took this money. I'm not surprised, but all these politicians, after they're out of office, they become more obviously than even when they're in office, the errand boys and girls of the 1%. It's like Tony Blair is fighting against Brexit. He's not even the prime minister anymore. But Brexit is bad news for the 1%, so he's still working on their behalf. And that's what we have to understand.
Yeah. The other binary I noted about was Trump versus the press. Now, we had the absurdity of the White House Correspondents' dinner this weekend, which, always seems to me that some kind of strange orgy between the White House press corps and the White House. These are people who should be at distance from each other, not scratching each other's backs and roasting each other. But somehow that's all been acculturated as to be normal. This is what we and thankfully Trump boycotted it. So a stop clock. I mean, you're gonna say, what is it? A stopped watch is right twice a day.
Right.
When Trump is right, you got to give him credit for being right. And in this case, he was right for saying this is absurd, and it might be for whatever his reasoning was. Might have been different than mine, but you know what? It was great to really just kill off that whole stupid event, pseudo event, really what it is. And then at the same time, he held that crazy whatever. I didn't even see the rally, but I saw the quotes, and I just have to say that I just don't pay attention to the gaslighting from him because I don't know what the point is. It's just people say, did you hear what he said about this and what he said about Andrew Jackson, what he said about this? Every 15 minutes it's going to be something new vomited from his mouth. That's absurd. And I don't know. I couldn't pay attention to anything else if I paid attention to him at all. So you have these two sides of absurdity here now. But again, people saying now he called the press the enemy. Now I said, it's kind of half right, and I wrote about that, when he said it and took some heat for it, but I still stand by that. And we can get to that. And then you have the other side of the press, acting so victimized and kind of, so you have to take one side or the other. People saying the press as like some sort of holy fourth estate. You got to be kidding me, okay?
Right.
This corporate sellout trash heap, okay, led by Rachel Maddow and Wolf Blitzer and all these high-paid multimillionaire mouthpieces, of corporate, malfeasance, destruction, and capital, just thievery. They just, because they dress and look like I'm a newscaster, that they have some authority over people, but they are just a faceplate. And people seem to worship them as if it's like Walter Cronkite or an actual figure like that. One more thing I'll say is that they took note at the dinner that Woodward and Bernstein were there, and that gave it some sort of gravitas. That was a time when the press was functioning as a fourth estate, and they couldn't take down a president. E.J. Dionne wrote that. Oh, it's notable that Woodward and Bernstein were there because it's a reminder that the press could take down a president. I'm saying that's just uncomfortable to even think about today.
It is. Well, it was 40 years ago when we really had an independent media. We had rules that forbade this media consolidation, so you couldn't own a TV station and a newspaper in the same city or own more than one newspaper. That's gone. So the Washington Post was a real newspaper, and the New York Times was a real newspaper, and the networks were independent. They weren't part of these conglomerates where General Electric, a defense contractor, owns NBC, or is it Comcast who owns? I'm not sure who owns NBC anymore, but Trump called the media the enemies of the people, and I thought it was funny because it sounded like something that came from some old line communist leader, the enemies of the people. But it's problematic with Trump because even when he says words I cannot disagree with, I believe the media are the enemies of the people. They lie to us. They cover up wrongdoing. They lift up some people. They dismiss other people. They don't give us a full picture of what's happening in the world, part of their retrenchment. And that's another problem with the press. They used to have bureaus all over the world. Now, when you see news from Syria, the reporter might be in Beirut. They're not even there. So the press are problematic for many, many reasons. So I do not defend the corporate media. And I agree with you about this White House Correspondents' dinner. It's a disgrace that in this country, one of the raps against Russia is they always say RT or some other Russian station or newspaper, state-controlled media.
Yeah.
Well, what is that except state-controlled media? You have people who cannot wait to rub shoulders with the powerful. And you can't do that unless you say what they want you to say, unless you work within the parameters that they have circumscribed for you. So I'm glad that there's a president who didn't go to the Correspondents' dinner and all this hand-wringing about every president since Reagan went. So what? It needs to die. It's gotten worse and worse with time. We've had presidents, Bush telling jokes about missing WMD. He launched a war based on this danger that didn't exist, killed 1 million people. Obama told jokes about drones. Enough. I'm glad a president wasn't there. And if the correspondents want to get together and have a party, let them do that. But I hope he's not the last president to boycott that event.
And if we actually had an independent press, they wouldn't be giving George W. Bush a platform to come talk about his paintings and prop him up as if he's some sort of kindergarten teacher. He broke the world in half.
Yes.
And probably, if not in jail, should be considered for prosecution for something. Okay. Obama also refused to look backwards on that, and now we have this so-called fourth estate, trusted, independent institution who just wants to prop up. I don't know what you can call it, but I've been, even somebody told me last night that Nancy Pelosi even said, "Oh yeah, in light of Trump, I'm beginning to miss George W. Bush." I mean, I don't know. I can't even respond to that. That's just crazy. It's just crazy that how you can recycle. And look, they did it with Reagan. They recycled Reagan, and then they recycled Bill Clinton, and now they're recycling. And you would have thought to yourself a few years ago, how in the world can they recycle George W. Bush? But they are, because people are just totally numbed out to awards programs on television and Captain Crunch cereal to whatever, that you could tell them anything. And here's the frame we'll set up for you, and here's how here's a script and follow. The thing I think that is important to get at, though, is that this whole binary thinking and what the press is really doing here is at the service of the capitalist system. In other words, it's all designed to keep us fighting one another rather than looking at the capitalist militaristic system as the problem. So if we're constantly binary against, women against men, black against white, Democrats against Republicans, this one against that one, like they're sporting events or something, then we won't stop and look at the structure that is keeping us all basically wage slaves to a certain degree, which is the capitalist system, and our military, which works at the bequest of that to go make sure capitalism is alive and well around the world.
Yeah, well, see, this is where it's gotten us. So Democrats have been told, you cannot complain about a Democrat. The Republicans are evil. So that means, I believe they are, but that the way it's explained to us is that means you cannot complain about a Democrat. So Obama becomes president. He's marketed as the peace candidate, yet he continues Bush's wars. He adds wars and instigates a coup in Ukraine against an elected president, ruins relationships with Russia, destroys Libya, tries to do the same with Syria. But binary thinking tells us you can't criticize a Democrat. So this is okay. So now you have buy-in for all the things that many Democrats said they didn't like. So now people are happily pro-war, which I think most people don't resist that much anyway, but that was an Obama thing, and Obama's wonderful. And you can't say Obama isn't wonderful, so war is okay. So the next thing you know, you can, with enough good PR and publicists behind him, George W. Bush can become this kindly old grandfather figure and do paintings of people who he maimed in this war, bad paintings at that. I cannot believe he's getting a hearing at all. Yep. But suddenly he's okay, or people can live with him, or, I miss him because Trump is so terrible. It's just disgraceful. And Nancy Pelosi, I don't get me started. A week or so after the election, she was asked at a public event, so she's on record. A young man asked her about the election and how the Democrats lost and what needed to change. And she said, and I quote, "We don't need to change anything. We don't need to change anything. Democrats are wiped out. State houses, Congress, Senate, the last thing they had was the presidency, and they messed that up." And she actually said, "We don't need to change anything." So that's where the binary gets you. There's nothing to change because the Democrats are better and you can't say anything against them, so they must be okay. So WikiLeaks must be operated by the Kremlin, and the FBI director, maybe he's operated by the Kremlin, I don't know. So Putin is to blame, and everybody's to blame except the Democratic Party, who don't know who are unwilling to do the things they need to do to get their voters out.
Yep. And if we talk about her equivalent in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. Another one who's been around, like stale bread politically at this point, but won't seem way past the sell date, as they say. But he, I'm sure he tried to keep this out of the public eye as possible. I wrote about this last week because I just kind of came across one of these things like on the back page about how he actually enabled the IRS to outsource debt collecting to private debt collectors. He was one of the sponsors of the bill. In fact, he proudly went to a depressed upstate New York county to celebrate 100 or so new jobs. And basically, what this would be neighbor calling neighbor to shake them down for money that they don't have. So some guy who needs a job in upstate New York is going to call up his neighbor who owes money to the IRS. Doesn't have the money, which is probably why he didn't pay, to shake them down. Okay, and this is something. This is talk about neoliberalism right here. But I mean, this is service to the capitalist system. This is your Democratic minority leader, the leader for the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who took campaign money from the company that basically was awarded these contracts. At the same time, they were awarded contracts for the education department to collect student loan money, and the education department fired them because they of course were operating beyond the lines and using sharp elbows. Of course, with students' debt, all those students, they're young, they can handle the elbows, And now apparently 2 attorneys general have sued this particular company, New York company, that Schumer was celebrating. All this is like this kind of flies under the radar. It all flies under the radar while they're kind of saying nice things about their identity politics.
Well, Schumer was the money guy for the Senate. He was in charge of raising money for Senate campaigns. So that tells you all you need to know about him. And being a senator from New York, of all places, you don't get to be a senator or a governor in New York State unless Wall Street wants you to be. So I'm not surprised. He's also one of the people whose incompetence helped Trump. He said something about during the campaign, well, we'll get Republican votes in the suburbs. We're not worried about Trump. We'll get Republicans in the suburbs to vote for us. Well, if you're a Democrat, why are you trying to get Republican votes at all? First of all, Republicans are going to vote for a Republican. They're not voting for Hillary Clinton because they're Republicans. And why is that something you want? Instead of talking about how do we get our people out, the people who are disaffected, and you would get them out by not doing the things that he does. Yeah. And so the Democrats hope to just skate through, do the bare minimum, promote themselves as being the party that protects the interests of the people, hope the Republicans become unpopular and they can slide back into office. And that is their only plan. And Chuck Schumer epitomizes that. It's awful. And it's people like him. I remember after the election, there was a town hall or something in Brooklyn, and people marched on his house. And I was glad. They should do it again. And ask him where he was when this horrible strategy was being concocted that ended up putting Trump in the White House. So the Democrats are really terrible. They're awful. They can't even win. So the whole, the lesser of two evils, which is part of the binary, right? You have to accept that somebody's really bad. And in order to get rid of them, you have to accept the other because there's no other option except this other party. And so now, but Democrats don't even win anything. So, I like to say now, the lesser of two evils argument doesn't work because you have one party that can't even win. So I say you're selling your soul for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, but still, the acculturating demon, in the room that keeps people into that binary thinking, in my estimation, is still the television. We have other media, of course, but I mean, it doesn't, if the television still wasn't the tool of choice, then Rachel Maddow wouldn't be so effective at what she does. So and they wouldn't pay her $7 million a year. Internet hosts that we know and like aren't making that kind of money. They might have 10, 20,000 followers, but still with that's still pocket change that you make. So television is the acculturating tool. They are what keeps people sort of inured into this thinking that there's no other hope outside this system, that you are, it's this phrase that Rabbi Michael Lerner uses, the subjugation of the soul to the marketplace, which I think totally talks about the core of neoliberalism, that we are just subjects, we're just a marketplace, cogs in a wheel, and you cannot think of yourself outside that. I had a chat with a gal today, and just talked about some of the things that we talk about, and it was so different for her to hear somebody talking this way, and she was just like, yeah, how come nobody talks like this? I said, well, do you watch television? And she's like, surprised by the question. I said, we actually don't have a television in our home, and that was so shocking. I said, yeah, well, that's why, I'm not put into that box of that framing of here's the reality, here's the world that you live in, go. And then if you have a problem with it, it's your attitude. You don't have enough gratitude, you're not positive enough, you're too negative, you're this, you're that, of all this sort of, mind games, rather than saying, you know what, maybe anger is the right emotion for now. Maybe, what am I actually grateful for? That you... My car insurance just went up $30 a month just out of nowhere because they allowed it in Florida, because they said there are a lot of accidents on the road. We're constantly being shaken down. For every extra dollar we make, they're taking an extra $2 from us, because which senator that from Illinois that said it, that the banks run the place. The banks run the place, and so capitalism and what it's done now on steroids keeps us into this box that we are just prisoners now to the system. It used to be that the economy served the citizenry, maybe for one point during the middle of the century. Now we're back to we serve the economy. And I think that's what this binary thing keeps us off of focusing on.
Well, people can't even think that there's an option, there's an alternative to capitalism. That people don't know that there is any other way of doing things. So we're told this is the best of all possible worlds. If you question it at all, are you a communist? Do you want to live like people did in the Soviet Union? Although some of them wanted to vote a communist back in, but Bill Clinton scuttled that. Talk about interfering with elections. But at any rate, and we're told that people who try to do anything else are miserable. Look at Cuba, look how terrible it is. Nobody tells you that sanctions keep Cuba from trading with other countries or improving itself. But so that's what we're told. This is the best system. This is the only system. There's nothing else you can do except vote. So every few years, they whip you up into a frenzy about voting. You're not supposed to be active in any other way. But you've got these two choices every 4 years. And the rest of the time, if you fail, it's because you're not working hard enough. It's because you made the wrong choices. Well, if you can't make a living here, you should have moved there, or you had too many kids, or why did you get sick? I mean, anything will do, rather than talk about how our system does not work. Capitalism used to provide living wage jobs. Now we don't even have that. Everything you hear about the millennials is they don't have jobs. And, sometimes it makes me angry. They'll say, oh, young people aren't buying cars, or they don't buy engagement rings, or they're not buying houses. I'm like, well, they don't have jobs. Of course not. So, and then if they go to college, they're told you have to go to college because college graduates do better than people who don't graduate from college. Okay, well, you can go to college anyway and end up worse off with this debt that you cannot discharge in bankruptcy, debt that lives with you the rest of your life. Now there are people who are senior citizens. People are having their Social Security garnished because of old college loan debt. So yes, it's our system. Our system is at fault. We are not at fault. And we're not at fault for wanting something else and to think about something else. and to, in my case, leave the Democratic Party and become a member of the Green Party. And people always say Jill Stein cost the election because she got X number of votes in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, and it was the difference with Trump and Hillary, so it's all her fault. And I say we need to get rid of the Democrats. We need to replace them. So yes, our system is hostile to third parties. It does make it difficult for a third party to be anything other than a spoiler. But I say build the Green Party, get more Green Party candidates, and ultimately get rid of the Democrats. People should have abandoned, that should have been the reaction to Trump's victory. People should have abandoned the Democratic Party en masse. So, but the binary that we're talking about prevents people from even thinking about that.
So a great way for people to start getting out of binary thinking is to read publications like Black Agenda Report and read people like Margaret. I'm going to post the link to your site, and so people can find out more about it, and hopefully people will subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then we also have an area where people can support if they have a few extra coins to support in our Patreon campaign or whatever to help us, because we're actually looking to expand to create more of a YouTube kind of a show that also, but that requires a little bit of money. So, but until then, we're going to keep doing it the way we do it. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to talk again soon.
Yes.
See you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.